Oh, my name is Host Eric. I'm the host talking to famous people, and I am here today to type Host Trenton's grandfather, and here he is. Hello, good evening or good afternoon. How are you?
Fine.
I'm good, thanks. So I'll just launch right in with some questions about how you experience life and such. First of all, are you likely when you go to leave the house and you're going somewhere to forget something that you intended to bring with you?
Uh, no.
Okay.
I'm usually very. I usually rehearse all that. Go over it. Don't forget this. Don't forget that.
Which of the following seems more like a statement that you agree with? Number one, it's important to be able to adjust on the fly as things change. Or right tool for the right job. You go in knowing how to handle something.
I usually go in knowing how to handle it.
Okay. Do you have an opinion about politics in general?
Uh, Not really. I don't claim to be a Democrat or Republican. I kind of look at the person in general, whatever party they are.
Okay. Um, do you think that you have a good read on other people's emotions? Let me rephrase this. Which would you identify with more? The statement that I manage other people by managing their emotions, or I decide about other people by determining how I feel about them?
Probably the second one.
Okay.
Uh,
Let's see. Do you feel as though you have a clear understanding of what it is that the process by which you go from not taking action to taking action, or do you feel as though it just sort of happens?
uh,
No, hold on. That might be the mailman. This is the problem. Goddamn mailman.
Say it again.
Compton, come in here. Compton, get in here. Right now. Come on. Come on. Inside. Inside. Compton. Inside.
This way, how's this thing going?
Sorry. I've got problems with the fact that I want to have the garage door open, but if the mailman hasn't come yet, then I have to keep it closed. Okay, so to proceed, let's talk about next the issue of truth. Do you think it's created or discovered?
Truth. It's a good one. Created or discovered? I think it would be discovered.
Okay.
I don't think you create truth.
Do you feel as though when you have an idea about either how to do something or what to do or what's right or what's wrong, any other kind of idea like that, that it's more like a single whole idea or more like a series of branching pieces of ideas?
Are you referring to like a task or something at hand?
Well, okay, possibly. So let's say you realize, oh my goodness, I've walked outside and I have some wooden steps here, and one of these steps is very, very loose. It could come off at any time. So you step on it, and you almost fall over, and you like grab the railing, and you go, oh geez, I almost fell over. Now walk me through your next how you deal with that. How many times do you step on it again before you fix it? And then tell me about the mental process in between.
Well, I would probably fix it right away, but I would probably evaluate the situation, why it's loose, and what problem, because that was the problem with the step being loose to begin with. Like it was the whatever had it fastened down was gone or missing, or whatever it was fastened into was damaged or something like that. So I may decide to evaluate all the steps then and see if they all.
I'm sorry, you're cutting out a little bit. You're at the moment. You're cutting out at the moment a bit. I can't quite hear what you're saying. If you could go no video for just audio for a bit, if there's I don't know what you're trying to set up there, but that would help us to hear you better, I think. Hi, Trenton.
Okay. Hello. All right. Is that better?
Yeah, it's much better. Thank you. Okay, so you assess situation. You determine what it originally supposed to have been, the way that it was affixed to the thing. You determine what had caused it to get unfixed, and then you'd fix it somehow, right? Is that basically what you're saying there? You're kind of cutting out.
Yes, that was basically it. I would probably determine what caused the problem and how to fix the problem where it would be fixed instead of just say taking a nail and driving it right quick and going on.
So you say if you don't have time to do the job right, you shouldn't do the job at all.
Well, as far as the step, you should fix it, but I mean, because somebody could get hurt or whatever on. But as far as a job that at hand, it should be done right.
Okay. Okay, let's say, could you ever imagine this conversation between you and Trenton? Trenton has gotten frustrated at something that's broken, perhaps, or not working properly, or just needs to be messed with in some way. And he kind of starts pounding on it a bit, like, just thinking more force was happening. And you tell him, Trenton, you need to understand, you can't just use the bigger hammer theory for everything. That if you've got some sort of a problem, just get a bigger hammer. Can you imagine that conversation happening? Or do you feel as though either party in that conversation would not behave as I indicated?
That sounds like a typical scenario for me and him. He would probably beat something with a hammer, then result to a bigger hammer, instead of looking to see why that hammer didn't work to start with. Mm-hmm. And sure wouldn't listen to why.
Out of curiosity, is your wife very orderly with her schedule?
No.
Okay. Is she very kind of like earth mothery, like I love everybody and feeling strongly about individual people? No, it's not like that either. Okay. Is she like you?
No.
No. What? How would you say she's different than you?
She has different views and perceives things differently and on different levels than I do. I'm a bit of a person that I like organization, or things organized and simpler, and she's more disorganized and than I am.
Would you say that? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, and I was just adding to that. she can live if stuff out of place or not being organized does not bother her. And then, it does me.
Right. Do you feel as though when you're out in the world and interacting with a lot of people, does that energize you or does it tire you out?
It energizes me.
Okay. I mean, my take on you, sir, is that Trenton is right. You are ESTJ. You remind me rather of my father, who's an ESTJ, and the bigger hammer theory is something he lectured me about many times. Eric, you've got to stop what you're doing there for a second and look at it and figure out why it's not working.
True. True.
Yeah. We like to do that, though. ENTPs, I'm one like your grandson there. We are good about doing that sort of thing with abstractions, but when it comes to physical objects, we get frustrated easily. Unfortunately.
True.
So, are you inclined towards a lot of complicated explanations for things in general? I mean, do you find that stuff interesting? Do you find it something you want to do a lot of work in, or something you find interesting as a reader or a viewer, or is it something you think is unnecessarily splitting hairs?
And your question was what? Do I do what now?
Okay, well, regarding like philosophy talking and stuff, like about what's the nature of truth and what's that kind of stuff. Do you in general find that interesting from a consumer perspective? Like, well, I like to read about it or view it. Do you find it interesting from a participatory perspective? Like, oh, I like to come up with ideas about that. Or do you find it unnecessarily splitting hairs that doesn't really mean anything?
Well, just about anything interests me to a point, and but I guess when it gets down to getting that far into like a person or something like that, it's getting away from me. It's getting to where that I don't understand it, and kind of like this what he's talking about, what he calls me and what he calls himself, and that's really getting in depth, to somebody.
Well,
but I'm sure there's people's actions and reactions and where they get along and where they fit in society and all this stuff is determined by this, and knowing a person in that field. But very few people is going to be able to walk up to somebody and talk to them and say he's a ENTJ or whatever, unless you studied it or really involved in it. But you can also walk up to a person and say, I just can't get along with that person. Me and them just don't see things on the same level. They look at something totally different than I do, and that's just the difference in the people. Mm-hmm. Which it's just as a person like me, I can't label them as what they are and what they're not.
Right.
But Trent seems to be able to.
Well, I mean, the thing is, my position on typing is first of all, it's not something that I generally. While I do type people, I say this is what type I think you are. I always defer to the individual if they say I'm another type. I don't think I'm necessarily right about it if they claim otherwise. But I think the key point about it is it's thought of as something more complicated in a way than it is. It's just a matter of the amount of time you spend each day looking at the world through one of several possible lenses. So, like, my mother spent most of her day talking through her schedule and stuff because that was her primary way of looking at things, was to be orderly. And somebody else, like me, I almost never think about my schedule. When I do, it's with a sense of anxiety and dread because I'd really rather not think about it, That's because that's not what I'm thinking about most of my time. It's a pretty simple notion that people are different from one another, but that they actually end up being different in predictable sets of ways because there's a limited number of perspectives through which people can look at the world. You can look at it through your feelings, through other people's feelings, through objects that you see in the world, or through yourself as an object. You can look at it as about internal logical consistency or about effectiveness out in the world. Which do you prefer of those two? Internal logical consistency or effectiveness in the world?
You probably have to explain a little more about what you're asking there.
Well, what I mean
Uh,
is, if I say, if you say, well, here's a plan to fix our. We have a city together, let's say, and there's a problem with littering in the park. Of late, people just started throwing trash in the park, and you say, well, look, let's just implement a small fine here in the park to, and just help people a ticket, and then it'll stop, and then we don't have to worry about it anymore. And then I say, yeah, but that's not consistent with this principle that we have in our city charter or something like that. What do you think about that dispute? Like, which is more important in determining the outcome of it?
I would probably be more concerned about fixing the problem, like they levying a small fine for littering as to get into a bunch of paperwork and, language and all that stuff about it. It's, you've
Right,
got one problem, trash.
right. And
And,
so And so the cognitive function model is as simple as saying this, that people will tend to approach that problem through one of those angles consistently as they encounter similar problems over time. So if I encounter the problem of the trash, the litter stuff, I'm going to start thinking about it in terms of principles of governance and consistency with that. And you're going to start thinking about it in terms of the very sensible conclusion that we should deal with the problem with the trash, right? And not so much worry about all those words and all that splitting hairs and stuff, right? So that's the difference of cognitive functions. It's not that one's better than the other or that it makes you be that way only. In fact, you can actively think about it and say, this time I'm going to choose to focus on this other thing instead. This time I'm going to choose to focus on getting rid of the trash instead of my normal habits of let's look at legal principles and stuff like that.
yeah, I can understand that. I would start out maybe looking at it, like the way I said, and if it was an ongoing problem and then stuff, you may have to get into the legal aspects of it and the word for word and all that stuff in order to fix the problem. Then, because the first way didn't.
Right. So
So
yeah, and
yeah,
ultimately it's not an inflexible box that people are putting other people in at all, or saying you must be this way. It's saying this is a description of your habits, of how you habitually interact inside your head with the outside world. And it turns
yeah,
out it kind of plays in a certain way. So I just wanted to clarify that because not only for you, sir, but for the viewing audience, because I think in general there's some misconceptions about cognitive functions, and they think that we're talking about little machines in your head that do things or something, but it's really as simple as habits of perspective. So anyway, my conclusion about your type, sir, is exactly what your grandson says, ESTJ, which means if, according to this model, that you foremost prioritize um, extroverted thinking, which is that fix it mindset. Well, let's solve the problem. Let's fix it. Let's figure out what's wrong with it and blah 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 blah. That's the priority in your mind when you're approaching the world is let's figure out effective solutions to things. And then second,
yeah,
you would have SI, which is organizational scheduling of yourself as your second function. So in the SI person, they know what they're going to do next Tuesday, or if they don't, it's because they know that's a free time scheduled times, or it hasn't been determined yet or something. They're going
sure,
to know where their tools go, right? They're going to say if I ask you where do you keep your screwdrivers, you have an answer to that. Well, I have an answer that says about 6 different places all over the place. I don't know. They're over there in general. Yeah. I'm sure
yeah,
your answer is probably better than that, right?
yeah. I know that person.
Oh, you know him. That's right. You're a grandfather to one of me, aren't you? Yeah, Trenton and I are
Yeah,
really, really similar. Let me tell you that I have a 17-year-old daughter, and she is an ENTP, but she is less like me considerably than your grandson. And I think it has to do with gender. I mean, obviously girls are different than boys. So, um,
yeah,
regardless, that's my conclusion about you is that you've got that TE and then SI second is the organization. Then your third function, you would have NE, which is possibilities, which makes it a good grandfather, father figure for an ENTP. And in the fourth, you've got what? Introverted feeling? No, wait, extroverted feeling. Am I got that right? Wrong? What is it, Trenton? Are you there listening?
Introverted feeling.
What?
Introverted feeling.
Introverted feeling is fourth?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. I did have it right. Okay. So, yeah. And you know what? This is the thing about ESTJs, I'll tell you. They care deeply about their relationship with their family. And whether or not introverted feelings in the fourth slot or not, they have the capacity for deep and enduring love. So that's my diagnosis typing of you. And it's been a pleasure talking with you. Any last comments from anybody before we conclude this episode of Talking with Famous People?
Yeah, think about whatever kind of conflicts you have with your ESTJ father, think about them and ask them to my grandfather, see if they're similar at all.
Okay. Well, I mean, the thing is, the biggest conflict was this. Stuff like, have you checked? When I give you this car, son, I say, now look, I'm giving it to you, but we got a deal here. You've got to check the oil this often for this many, every 2 months or something, or however often you're supposed to check it. I don't know, but I don't remember what exactly he said. And he said it, and I'm like, of course I'm going to do that. Of course, yes, I'm making sure I'll do that. And then went completely, I didn't want to hear out the other, and I completely forgot about it. I never did anything. And he was always like coming and saying, son, have you checked your blah, 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 blah. And I'd always be like, Dad, no, I haven't checked it, okay? Can you please just stop bugging me about that? Does that sound familiar to you?
Well, that's right on.
Yeah. Well,
That's definitely. Yeah.
Can you think of any examples, Greg?
Oh, wow. I have lots.
It sounds like everything ever. Some kind of agreement is, and I agree with the terms he's given me, and then I never follow through with the terms. Ever.
I know. Well, I tell you what, it doesn't change, by the way. I have taken to doing this. If you're going to give me those terms, make me complete them before you give me the thing.
I'll try that.
That's right, because otherwise, I mean, I'll just be like, well, yeah, of course I'll do that, but then at some point something else will happen, and I'll be like, well, I was going to do that. Sometimes I will, though, of course. See, we're so unpredictable that sometimes we do follow through and do the thing, right? Sometimes Trenton does. And it does matter according to how much importance he thinks you ought to be placing on it, unfortunately, which is got to be frustrating, right? You're trying to help him out, and then you go, well, then let's do this, and then he says, of course, but then later he starts evaluating, well, does that actually make sense to me that I ought to have that thing? That's the problem. I'm sorry for our nature. He will, however, with this model, it helps you to improve substantially because he'll start to metacognate more about his own way of dealing with you. He'll check it for consistency. The good news is we apply the same break everything down kind of approach to ourselves and our own way of thinking. So he'll ultimately figure out how to be more cool and more considerate. And he cares very deeply about you. It doesn't mean he doesn't care. It just means he's a little bit crazy, but in a good way, in a charming, lovable way, okay?
I determined that about age 2.
You could tell that early, huh? So what was he like as a 4-year-old or 3-year-old or whatever? Talking all the time?
All the time. Woke up in the morning wide-eyed and ready to go and tickled and giggling and come out of the bed, and he would actually run around our living room, climb up on the couch, jump off the back of the couch, run back around to the front, jump up, climb up on the back, and he would do this for hours. And just wow, we got an open our living room's all open to the kitchen and everything, so he had plenty of room to run. And it was just constantly all day long. And then he would want me to put him on a trampoline out in the front yard, and he'd sit there and he'd bounce for hours, just burning that energy. And but as far as holding attention on anything for very long, that didn't happen.
Right.
Because it was just like a fuse, burn up and it's gone, off something else.
Right.
But he's a good kid. He was a happy kid.
He's a smart kid. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing that frustrates people about us is you probably said, man, if this guy would just give his attention to something for more than 5 minutes, he's awfully bright, he would probably achieve at a high level.
True.
Well,
Yeah.
did you have problems with him with his school teachers and stuff, or how did that go?
It was a roller coaster ride, a lot of times I didn't understand why, the whats and the whys, he had a big problem with going from, home life to school life. And I don't know if it was just the difference in the people.
What was the actual issues that I would have from teachers? What would they say? When I would get in trouble, what was the problem?
He was always, he went through several phases. Like in early years, he had trouble coping with other discipline, other people trying to discipline him or guide him or anything like that. And which, second, third grader, it's a real turning point, for them when it comes to those situations. But as he got older in school, then it was mostly like a cutting up and not being responsible and things like that. And then he finally realized got self-diagnosed of what all his problems was as he got into high school and
There was
stuff.
a many of things. There was many diagnoses.
Which he started trying to correct and deal with them to improve his outcome. Which he done pretty good at it. I mean, he got to where that he could control a lot of that attention deficit and stuff like that, where he couldn't pay attention and make good grades in school and things like that, and figured out where his problems was at and kind of corrected things and tailored things to where that he could get his tasks done as far as schoolwork and things like that.
It's interesting hearing it from the perspective of somebody who's raised an ESP himself. I raised Delilah. She had a lot of problems, but they weren't ever with teachers. She wasn't as H in her ADD. I'm not quite as H in my ADD as Trenton either, I don't think. But she had her own ADD issues, which stemmed from just being unable and unwilling to attend to things like assigned tasks. She might do fine if everything were in class. She would have done fine. It's like if
Right.
teachers were giving all those assignments in class, she would have done fine in school. It was anything they assigned outside of school. If I weren't sitting there with her, which I wasn't because I'm lazy too, doing it with her, then she just wasn't getting. She wouldn't get to it. She'd lose it. She'd forget about it. There'd be some sort of problem. Any number of things would happen. It was just not what she wanted to be doing.
Well, Trent was the same way when it came to outside of school, tasks outside of school. He's never done homework in his life because he would not come home and do no homework, no way, of any kind. He managed to figure out a way to do it at school, in school, or he would have failed school because if it was pertained to do what he'd done at home, he would not do any kind of homework. I've tried it, to get him, try to help him as he was going through school, until he got above my expertise. But he would do it. He would not give time or attention to anything of type of homework. It's just like, he put his time in at school, and that's all he's doing.
Did you try to come up with plans like, okay, well, I tell you what, let's incentivize this. If you do this, then I'll give you this reward. And or alternately try to do the alternate, like, well, let's disincentivize this. If you don't do this, then you're going to get this sort of punishment or whatever. And it'd be over a long-term period, say a quarter or a semester?
I probably tried if you do this and that, I'll do this and that for you, or whatever. But I'd give up on it real quick, because neither one of them was working. He wasn't going to do it regardless.
Right, yeah. Long-term plans like that, they just don't work at all. This is something I used to fight with my ex-wife about, because she tried to put these things in place with Delilah all the time, and they never work, and I just tell her that doesn't work. It's this thing where you go, well, now look, Delilah, if you get good grades, at the end of the semester, we'll give you X, Y, and Z. I told Candace, if she gets those good grades, it will be unrelated to this thing you just said or this promise you just made. Completely unrelated to it. She can't operate on that long of a time frame. She can't keep some sort of long-term reward in mind and maintain attention for that long on the thing motivated by that long-term reward. So I think that's an interesting phenomenon in parenting, that some parenting types like to make those kind of long-term things, and other types are able to perform underneath those conditions, and some types are not. So,
Eric,
yeah.
What interested you in, do you remember what interested you in middle school or early in high school?
In what? In middle school or high school?
Early in high school.
Early in high school. Well, I mean, like your grandfather says here, I too went through a lot of different phases. But when I was in middle school, I was really into Swords and Dragons stuff, Swords and Dragons books and stuff like that. But as I got into high school, I started being into basically, I guess, being fancy or something, like contradicting people. I got into being contrary. I was my habits, I don't know, they vacillated back and forth. I went through a lot of phases, for this period of time I'm into this thing, for that period of time I'm into that thing. I don't really remember what they all are now, because it was a long time ago. But I kind of have been like that forever until I got a little bit older, had a kid, things started to sort of settle down a bit. And now I kind of have, I'm not focused infinitely broadly. So he will find sort of direction at some point in that regard. But what sort of things did he get interested in as phases during his high school or middle school period?
He's asking you.
Asking me what he gets into.
What did he describe some of the phases that he went through in high school? Specifically describing, please, the things that he was interested in, or the subject matters of stuff that he became interested in, or behaviors and things like that.
Well, it's a hard one, because a lot of his interest he didn't express, and he got into the normal things that children do at his age and his era. It's cell phones, gaming on TV and computers and stuff like that. He got into recently, in the last year or two, I guess a couple of years, he's got into all this philosophy stuff and things of that nature, to where I think he's pretty much devoted most of his time either to entertain himself with gaming, or he's reading something that pertains to this psychology stuff. And so I think he's on a rail far as psychology. Right now he's fixing to start into high school and college. And he's if you ask him what he's going to do, what he's going to study, what he's going to be, acts like he's a little bit unsure. But from my view, I think that I don't think he could perceive anything other than some psychology type of education.
Could you see being a mechanic?
Because he don't have a whole lot of passions for things, because it's just, like it's there and it's gone, and kind of like what you was talking about. But this, he seems like he has stuck with it. And he teaches himself and researches and reads and learns when he don't have to. So in my view, that's a true passion in order for him to take his rambling mind and concentrate it on something like that for that long. So if I was to give him my advice for the way to go as far as education, I would get into some type of psychology, and because if I had to say Trent knows more about this than anything, that's probably what it would be. I mean, I've tried to teach him things, mechanical things over the years. I do this, do that. Because he's had to help me a lot. We go out here and I say we got to take these wheels and tires off this. He would do what I told him to do, but as far as an interest in it, he had no interest in it at all.
Yeah, I had to help my dad too. I had to help him a lot, and I hated it all the time. I hated it. I hated having to go paint the thing. Like, go, son, we're going to the rental properties. We're going to paint the blah, 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 blah. God damn it, I don't want to go do that. But we do it. We go and we do it. Because the whole time you're doing that kind of stuff, you're thinking about how that kind of stuff is done. When we're doing that kind of stuff, we're thinking about something completely unrelated to what we're doing.
That's him. And it got harder to get anything out of him as he's got older. I'm just about down to nil, right now.
Well, you're getting this wonderful conversation out of him.
Yeah, that's more than I've got.
Listen, you know how you said he's doing stuff that even though he doesn't have to do it, right? He's like reading and learning stuff that he doesn't have to do. But see, the problem is, and it's kind of probably bad news, is that the reason he's doing it is because he doesn't have to do it. If he had to do it, he wouldn't want to do it. And the solution to that is, there's the good news though, is I think what you need to seriously consider is the possibility that Trenton needs to find some sort of entertainer type position doing stuff like this, because this affords me as somebody, or doing what I do, which is a debate coach. As a debate coach, that's a good job because it's real, it's adversarial, he's competitive. That's where the motivation comes from. Most things are non-competitive, so he's unmotivated at them.
Sure.
But yeah, this lets you do lots of different things and explore lots of different ideas and not really be too bound into one thing, a YouTube channel. So it's a good thing for an ENTP to have. I've encouraged Trenton to participate in this one as much as he wants to, of course. And, or he should make his own if he wants to, of course. But this is a good thing for ENTPs because it helps them to actualize externally. They say in this psychology community that Trenton needs to actualize externally, which means he needs to, if he wants to understand who he is better, he needs to say it out loud in front of other people and have a permanent record of it, like a YouTube video, so that he can really come to understand himself as best as possible. That's what the model generally sort of says for us, this weird type that we are. But anyway, I think that those are a couple of possible angles for him to go. Debate coaching is what I do. I have a debate business, and it's a good, solid profession. It's pretty lucrative if you're doing it in the right area, and it's something that is basically tailor-made for our kind of brain. Something to think about. So anyway, thank you very much for being a guest and talking with Famous People. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you, and I'm going to stop this video now and wish all the viewers at home a happy day, and don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.